Friday, Attorney General Merrick Garland appoints a special counsel to oversee the ongoing investigation into his boss's son, Hunter Biden, as the Department of Justice now says that Hunter Biden will likely have to face a trial on tax and gun charges. Plus, Donald Trump's lawyers also appear in federal court today as the judge limits what the Republican frontrunner can say in his election interference case and issues a new warning against intimidating witnesses. And new images of the utter destruction from wildfires on the island of Maui in Hawaii. At least 55 people are dead, more than 1,000 are still missing, in what the governor is calling the worst natural disaster in the state's history. Happy Friday. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd reporting from Washington, and we begin today with multiple breaking developments on legal cases that have significant political implications for the 2024 race for president. In an unexpected, but also perhaps, in hindsight, inevitable move today, Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the appointment of U.S. Attorney David Weiss to now serve as a special counsel to oversee the Justice Department's ongoing investigation into President Biden's son, Hunter Biden.
On Tuesday of this week, Mr. Weiss advised me that in his judgment, his investigation had reached a stage at which he should continue his work as a special counsel, and he asked to be so appointed. Upon considering his request, as well as the extraordinary circumstances relating to this matter, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint him as special counsel.
And just moments after that announcement from the Attorney General, Weiss's team revealed in a court filing that plea negotiations with Hunter Biden's lawyers over tax and gun charges had fallen apart and that they expect the case to go to trial now. The White House says it was not given advance notice of today's announcement. Weiss, who was appointed U.S. Attorney in Delaware by Donald Trump, is now one of 3 special counsels that have been appointed by Merrick Garland. That includes a special counsel named Robert Hur, who obviously is somebody you don't hear a lot from. He was the one that was appointed to investigate President Biden's handling of classified documents. In fact, NBC News was first to report earlier today that attorneys for President Biden are actually in talks with federal prosecutors and Mr. Hur over the idea and the terms of an interview with the president. All of these developments come as lawyers for Donald Trump and federal prosecutors working for another special counsel, Jack Smith, were in court today. The judge ruled that a protective order limiting what the former president can say about evidence can only apply to what she called sensitive materials, not all materials. And it'll be up to the Justice Department to decide those sensitive materials. And while right now the courtroom may be the most important venue in the fight for the Republican nomination, Trump's Republican rivals are fighting it out in what is traditionally ground zero in the fight for a primary campaign for president, the Iowa State Fair, where they are meeting and greeting and eating with voters all over the place. So let's unpack the legal situation then. Joining me now on set, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. We also have Garrett Haake. He covers the Trump campaign. And also with me is White House correspondent Monica Alba and Carol Lamb, a former federal prosecutor and NBC News legal analyst. All right, Ryan, let me start with you. We'll get into sort of, let me ask this, what took so long? When you think about the rationale that Merrick Garland laid out for naming Jack Smith as special counsel, and in fact, I think I have that sound. I want to play it right now.
The Department of Justice has long recognized that in certain extraordinary cases, it is in the public interest to appoint a special prosecutor to independently manage an investigation and prosecution. Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. Such an appointment underscores the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters.
Ryan, the reason I played that again, and I don't want to confuse people, he didn't say that today. He said that in November, and that was to Donald. The same rationale. It makes sense for Hunter Biden. What took so long?
Well, I mean, Hunter Biden isn't a presidential candidate, so I think there's a little bit of a distinction there. But, moreover, I think that the U.S. attorney who was in charge and is now the special counsel here said that he needed everything, that he had everything that he needed, right? He could make these decisions independently, that there wasn't really a reason for him to be appointed special counsel. Something changed recently, and that was on Tuesday, apparently, is when, for the first time now, that U.S. attorney then asked to become special counsel. So now we're in a situation.
We don't know what changed, though, do we?
We don't. We really don't know what changed.
Why should he be tried? Look, yeah. Lindsey Graham brings up, I think, a fair criticism. This guy botched the plea deal. Lindsey Graham describes it, says it's the craziest plea deal ever. It's please. That's not. But why put the same attorney in charge of this?
I mean, he is a Trump-appointed attorney.
There's other Trump-appointed attorneys they could have found.
This is true. I mean, he was the one who was sort of looking at this at the beginning, right? This case was sort of on his plate when this all came about. And ultimately, the stuff that they ultimately focused on, which is why this really got tricky, was not ultimately in Delaware, right? Mm-hmm. So when these cases are brought forward going forward, we're probably either going to see them in D.C. or in California because there's not really venue. The only reason that it moved forward temporarily in Delaware was because Hunter Biden agreed to say, hey, okay, I'll waive venue.
So are you
here.
saying that the rationale may simply be so he can file charges in another jurisdiction?
That's potential.
And that's the only reasoning?
That is one explanation of many. I think that, but he doesn't have the ability to do that, right? At this point, because there's no plea deal anymore, he would have to move forward. He can't really do that in Delaware. He has to do it in the place where the alleged crimes actually took place, because this is now a contested issue. This isn't something we're going to say, okay, we got this, we agree, let's move forward, let's put this behind us.
Monica Alba, I know what the White House is saying publicly. Nothing. They can say nothing publicly. What are you hearing behind the scenes? How concerned are they? This is no longer something they can compartmentalize as a right-wing obsession. Joe Biden's attorney general decided to name a special counsel into Hunter Biden. This takes that talking point off the table. What's the Ian Sams argument now?
You're right, Chuck, in that this now becomes incredibly complex politically, but I think the big thing I'm hearing from sources that I've checked in with is the added family dynamic to all of this just really complicates it. And we did get a preview of that when the plea agreement news initially emerged earlier this summer, and the president and first lady put out that statement saying, we love Hunter, we support him, we stand by him, we're not going to say anything else. And over the course of the weeks after that, I did a lot of reporting on just how the president views anything that relates to Hunter. And when aides have brought it up to him in the past, he has essentially told them, get out of here. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to listen to what you're saying to me about my son. He's my son. I love him dearly. I'm not going to keep a distance. Remember, we saw Hunter at the state dinner, at many different appearances in the weeks after that. There was absolutely no effort to make any kind of a change to the real modus operandi of this family inside the White House. And so I don't think you're going to expect to see that shift. And as part of my conversations today, that is still the line. Of course, this is a president who is now dealing with his own special counsel separately. His son is now under special counsel review. But at the end of the day, they're saying this is a father who, that is how he views this, through that prism first and foremost. Whether that creates a ton of blind spots for him, whether that is something that politically backfires, he doesn't really care. And so that has been the sort of first knee-jerk, a little bit more probably emotional reaction to all of this. But the White House is going to continue to say this is like any other Department of Justice probe. We had nothing to do with it. We didn't have any kind of a heads up. This is not us interfering in any way either. And they want to make that a very crystal clear point as well, Chuck.
Well, we shall see what this does. His polling numbers are just in terrible shape when you consider who his opponent is in the thrice indictments. And speaking of that, Ryan, let me move to that case. And you were in the courtroom for that. And I will get you in here, Garrett, since your beat is the Trump beat. So the judge, on one hand, accepted the premise that there are some things that are sensitive. But she also seemed to put the burden on the Justice Department to decide what would be sensitive and what isn't. So do we have an idea of what that is yet?
I think the Justice Department wants to make that a lot of things. There are some things that are just public that he can access in other ways. He already has access to a lot of this information they're turning over in discovery. So, that huge number when you hear 1.6 million documents, it's a lot. But he's already got a lot of that. A lot of this will be searchable. Is all of it relevant? It's going to be a lot of transcripts. I mean, certainly a lot of work. But I think DOJ is basically coming out and saying, a lot of this, should be protected, and especially because of the language that we've already seen Trump use on social media and the impact that we've seen in other cases. It's very important to make sure that's protected.
What's enforcement look like?
Great question. I mean, right, there's really only
Look
one.
at Garrett sitting there. Well, that's what we all want to know.
I think there's a good
what
answer
does
now.
enforcement look like?
I mean, the judge sent a very strong message at
Yeah.
the end of that, and she said she would do what is necessary to make sure that this doesn't become a circus, that we're going to keep these rules in place, that they're going to operate as close to normal as is possible in this case.
I thought the judge came up with a very effective enforcement mechanism. We had this conversation yesterday. It wasn't clear what it would be. Her comments that anything you say that could prejudice this case, that could interfere with the jury pool or witnesses, will speed up the date at which we need to go to trial. I thought that was by far the most effective.
You thought
way
that was effective by basically saying, look, the more you mess around with this,
the quicker we got to start.
The quicker we'll start.
There's
the
nothing
trial.
Donald Trump's team wants more than to delay this. They would delay
Well,
years.
let me
if they
put
could.
up the current calendar. This is the calendar as proposed by the Justice Department right now and everybody else on. This is Trump's primary calendar, if you will. So there's August 23rd. So January 2nd would be start of the trial. 13 days later, Iowa. Then, of course, you have March. We've left out all of the other primaries in between January and March there. We will update that graphic when we get the chance. But there's a couple things I'm hearing here. Number one, that the Justice Department is likely to ask New York to move their date. That is more likely than not going to happen. Opening the spring. I mean, is the Trump legal team going to be realistic in their ask?
No, not at first.
Okay.
I mean, I think that in the ask that they're going to put on paper coming up here, I wouldn't be surprised if they ask for a date in 2025.
Right.
But I think they understand that, they got to start
They
big
got a
and
judge
walk
who has no
backwards.
interest in that.
No, absolutely not. But that became more clear today, by the way. She said in several different ways, basically, your politics are your problem. I mean, that she made it very clear that Donald Trump being a political candidate is not going to factor into her decision at all.
Before I turn to Carol Lamb to sort of unpack more of this legal stuff, Washington Post had an interesting little story today, our friend Aaron Blake over there, about how suddenly Donald Trump is adding the phrase, in my opinion, quite a bit now, that the lawyers have gotten him. He still says the election was stolen, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's a noticeable change. Are you noticing this?
Yes, but this is the kind of thing where he gets cautious for a few days or a few speeches, and then he backs off. We've seen this pattern for 8 years now, so I wouldn't expect it to hold. It does seem like the lawyers might have gotten a hold of the teleprompter for a little bit, but ask me again in a week.
Ryan, when should we expect a final decision on trial date? Next week?
The end of the month is when it's really going to be set, to 28th. So Trump's team has to respond in the next few days, and based on what the judge said today, given that they are receiving
the window
those
is much smaller.
1.6 million documents, you said, well, I can guess what your suggestion is going to be after learning that number of the figures of documents they're going to receive. It's going to, I think Garrett's right, they're going to try to go as long as they can.
The best they can hope for is the summer, isn't it, of next year? And that would probably be generous.
I mean, if I had to put a number, I think maybe March, somewhere in that, couple months down the road. Yeah.
All right, let me bring in Carol Lamb now. Carol, I want to start with this Hunter Biden case. We are 2 weeks removed from a near plea deal, and now the same person's a special counsel. I can't recall something like this. You've done this for a career. How unusual?
Chuck, I think that you have to look at what was going on in Merrick Garland's world during all of these special counsels. The Department of Justice is not set up to be a department of special counsels. Maybe you have one special counsel investigation going on at a time. At one point, he had 3. Now, then the Pence special counsel finished its work, and then now it looks like we're going to have 3 again. That's very unusual. And I think Ryan was exactly right when he said the difference here is that Hunter Biden himself is not actually a presidential candidate. So I think Merrick Garland was trying to keep a door or raise the bar for having a special counsel. And he thought at that point, when he let David Weiss proceed as a U.S. attorney as opposed to a special counsel, that he could give him independence. He was a Trump appointee. He could tell him, the field is clear for you. And there was this possibility that they were working towards a plea, and that would be enough. David Weiss, what changed this week was that apparently the plea negotiations have totally broken down. And so it looks like now, at least for now, they could always restart and we could always see a plea in the future. But for now, it looks like they're heading towards a potential indictment on felony charges and possibly a trial. With that kind of situation facing Hunter Biden and these IRS whistleblowers who have come forward and said, this was not actually an objective, fair investigation, I think that Merrick Garland made the decision that this in-between kind of solution he found or he created to have David Weiss doing this as a U.S. attorney just wasn't enough for appearance's sake. And so now he was going to take the next step and make it a special counsel situation. There's no ideal situation here for Merrick Garland, but he's taking the step that, especially when David Weiss asked to be made a special counsel, he couldn't say no at that point. So I think that's where that's why the chips have fallen where they are. I
get why it happened, but this doesn't feel like the right solution here because it doesn't absolve what he's trying to absolve the Justice Department of, which is the perception of bias.
There's always a perception of bias, Chuck. That's the problem, because the Department of Justice works for the executive branch. The Department of Justice works for the president. And so generation after generation, we see this issue coming up. You know, the worst example was probably the Saturday Night Massacre. You know, there is just an inherent tension there where the Department of Justice reports to the president. And now we have had 3 presidential candidates in this election, in this anticipated election. We've had 3 with special counsels appointed to investigate them, and now a 4th to investigate one of the candidates' son. So it's you're never going to get rid of this tension unless you change the Constitution.
The irony was the whole idea. Merrick Garland wanted to avoid all special counsels, and it did feel as if the minute he felt Trump forced his hand to do it, when Trump decided to announce as a candidate. But the minute he did it, it felt like he opened the door to keep naming them. Because once you make perception of bias your rationale for starting one, how does it not apply to almost every other politicized case you're dealing with?
There's a big difference of opinion about that very point, Chuck. Some people feel that it was not necessary to appoint a special counsel in the case of investigating Donald Trump. Some people say it was inevitable. It's not, there's no great solution to this. Merrick Garland made the call he made. No. But yes, once he was being investigated for retention of classified documents, and then they were found in the possession of both Mike Pence and Biden, then it became inevitable that he had to appoint those special counsels as well.
Let me ask you about the judges in the judge in the Trump trial using speeding up the trial date as an incentive not to speak out. Do you think that's about the best way she could, quote, enforce her warning to the defense?
I don't know if it's the best way, and I don't know if it's the only way. This is a big power struggle between Donald Trump and Judge Chutkan, and she has to win this struggle. I mean, this is her courtroom. She has to make sure that her rules are followed, and she does have several levers at her disposal. I was expecting her to somehow involve his lawyers because they have their own independent responsibility to follow ethical rules and to follow the court's rules. Could she threaten them in jail?
She could threaten them with contempt?
She could, because she has actually now made them part of her requirements, right? She says, you have to look at his notes that he takes when he's reviewing the discovery, and you have to establish that he is not writing down any witnesses identifying information. And so if he comes out and he discloses that publicly in his rallies or in his tweets or in his social media, she's going to bring those lawyers in and say, did you do everything I told you to do? And that doesn't violate the attorney-client privilege. She's saying, I put these requirements on you. And so they're now feeling on the hook, and they're going to be nervous about it, and that's going to make them more diligent, and it's going to make them pay attention to what Donald Trump is doing.
All right. That's the legal situation. I'm going to get into the political fallout from this, but Monica, I want to get your 2 cents. Does the Biden team, are they aware this could sort of, there's already hand-wringing about him in the primary. There's hand-wringing because of the whole no labels thing. Are they worried the special counsel could lead to more of that?
I mean, I think this is a less than ideal scenario, no matter who you ask, but they also have really taken the view that cooperating and allowing this to unfold the way it needs to is also a very important part of the calculation. I think you also have a White House here that is watching and waiting like everybody else to see like just how long this is going to take. If we're talking about this going to trial for Hunter Biden, later this year? Does it get punted to sometime in the 2024 calendar year? Like, do you have the president's son on trial at the same time that the former president is on trial? Is something completely different in that calendar that you were showing in that primary process? That's not beyond the realm, and that becomes a part of the conversation that they cannot ignore, even though that will be their strategy. I don't expect any kind of a messaging shift to change here. I think they're going to continue to say that this is what we're doing, and, you know, Hunter Biden's own attorneys continue to say at the end of this they think he will be cleared of all wrongdoing. So we'll see.
And Garrett, I assume the Trump folks are just ecstatic that it's all muddy. This is all he wants. He just wants it to look muddy on everybody.
Right. I mean,
and everybody's got it now.
Hunter Biden doesn't have to be convicted of anything. Certainly Joe Biden doesn't have to. Now it's what about all the way to the bank, regardless of what the special counsel finds.
All right. Well, it was a heavy open, but we had a lot to get to. You guys were terrific. Ryan, Garrett, Monica, Carol, thank you all. Coming up, the old-fashioned politics. All eyes on Iowa. At least we're trying. The Republican frontrunners' 2024 rivals are fighting to win over Iowa voters, fighting to be the top Trump alternative if it even matters. We're going to talk a little politics and pork chops at the all-important state fair just ahead. But first, like a bomb went off. That's how the governor of Hawaii is describing the scene in the historic town of Lahaina. We're on the ground with the latest. Next, you're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. At least 55 people are now confirmed dead from the wildfires in Maui. And officials expect that number to rise as rescue and recovery moves into a fourth day, and they're actually able to get to more of the island now that these fires are contained and getting put out. Maui County Mayor Richard Bisson told NBC this morning that the death toll so far only accounts for people found outside of buildings or in cars. The inside of many, many buildings destroyed by the fire, they haven't been searched yet. That's why there is some grim concern that this death toll number could go up very high. Firefighters continue to battle 6 fires on Maui and the Big Island, with the devastating Lahaina fire now 80% contained. New drone footage of the island's historic town of Lahaina shows the scope of this devastation. Buildings were reduced to burned-out shells or simply turned to ash in some cases. The governor of Hawaii, Josh Green, compared the scene to a bomb blast zone. Witnesses shared their harrowing experiences from the fires with NBC News, as some survivors just narrowly escaped the flames.
As the fires got closer to us, we realized we had to keep moving and jumping into the water because the car would be on fire and the flames would be coming over the wall and hitting us.
I just knew that it had choke smoke, and I couldn't tell where I was sometimes.
And when we first got there and got through, it was devastating. It felt like a war zone, and it was still fresh.
Locals are pointing to one symbol of hope and resilience in the rubble. This is a large banyan tree, a 150-year-old tree that served as a monument in the heart of Lahaina. It's badly scorched, but it is still standing. And officials say they assume the roots are still healthy, meaning the tree will grow back. Steve Patterson is live at Maui's airport for us. So, Steve, give us the latest today. Are people getting out of the island that want to? And more importantly, are people allowed to go in and inspect their homes yet?
Yeah, Chuck, we're hearing from the governor that people will be allowed to come back to their homes. Still early, want to make that clear. The announcement could come in the next 3 to 6 hours or so. Usually we get the announcements every 3 hours, so 9, 12, 3. Could be about 3 o'clock. People hear, yes, the roads are opening up. You can go back to your homes. But that comes with a warning. Of course, the governor saying, yeah, you can get back to your neighborhoods at some point today, but God knows what you're going to find. And he's made that perfectly abundantly clear that these are sites that nobody has ever seen in this state's history. So we've moved, Chuck, I want to make that clear. We're at a shelter now here on Maui. This is Maui High School behind me. We've seen people all day long bringing blankets, bringing fuel, bringing food, bringing water. Much like that banyan tree, it is sort of the hope that exists. And the aloha spirit here, it is still keeping people together. And anybody that was a survivor has now become somebody that is donating to the cause, which is great to see, but still so many harrowing stories, just like you heard there, of people barely able to escape and making it out to a shelter like this.
Steve, what do we know about what's still burning?
Yeah, 6 fires still burning, Chuck. They are not out. They're mostly contained, which is really good, especially the one that burned Lahaina. 80% contained. Usually when containment goes above 25%, that fire is burning out. So that's what we've seen there. It is really the one bit of good news that we know. It is unlikely that any more fires will spread to communities. But anytime you have fire, all it takes is a good wind gust and enough fuel for that to move to a different location. So, of course, fire officials keeping an eye on it, but for the most part, the operation is now focused on the town that you are seeing, trying to get anybody connected to the missing, and then trying to pull bodies out of that rubble. Chuck.
Steve Patterson on the ground force in Maui. Steve, thank you. I'm joined now by Alexa Caskey. She's a resident and restaurant owner in Lahaina and was there when the fire broke out. She's been helping to feed those in need of late. Alexa Caskey, thanks for taking a few minutes. So just tell me about the minute you realized what was happening.
I was a little bit south of the fire. I'd been watching it for a couple hours. People had evacuated from Lahaina town to my house. And then when the fires got really close to where we were, we all decided to evacuate when one of our exits was blocked by fire. So we knew it was going to be bad. We didn't know how bad. And now my efforts have been mostly trying to, one, get fuel to people that are stranded on the west side that are okay to get in their cars to be able to get to houses that have been volunteered, with space to house people who are displaced right now.
How much warning do you feel like residents had? Is this something that you feel like you should have had more, or look, this was just an unusual circumstance and, look, everybody was caught?
I didn't really hear any warning at all. So I think that probably could have been better for sure. It isn't unusual for us to have fires in Lahaina. It's quite dry there during the summer. We do get a lot of high winds, which almost every time seems like it results in a fire, although this one has definitely been the most devastating that I've ever witnessed. And it just spread so fast for the 36 hours pretty much prior to when we left, which was Wednesday morning, I believe. It just sounded like freight trains. The wind sounded like freight trains for a day and a half. It was absolutely unrelenting. So it's not surprising that the fire was spreading so quickly that it really caught a lot of people off guard.
You said some ways this is something, it's not unusual to have some fires start. Is this, what is it usually? Do people camp out? Are these campfires gone wrong, bonfires gone wrong, or just the dry season?
I think they could be started from a number of things. I think that the big one from 2018 I had heard was a result of arson. There were a number of them that were started basically simultaneously in very high winds. They didn't last as long as these, but also very, very high winds spread the fires very quickly and burned down a couple of homes. And it seemed devastating at the time, and it was certainly, but it was nowhere near as terrible as this one was. We generally do have a fire on the west side that's fairly substantial, I would say at least once a year, but this one is by far the worst.
Rebuilding, it is how confident that everybody's going to have the will to do that?
I think a lot of people are going to leave. A bunch of people that I know that had lived in a rental property that I had for employees or have told me that they're leaving and moving to California or moving back to the mainland immediately, which, is going to be good for a lot of people. There's not going to be there's not going to be jobs. There's not going to be ways to make money. They don't have anything right now. And there's definitely, obviously, people are going to be trying to rebuild. I have no idea when that's going to start.
This sets back the local economy a couple of years minimum, doesn't it?
I think that it's going to take 6 months just to pick up the rubble,
Right. Well, Alexa Caskey, I know you've been trying to do your best to help others as you were able to survive. It's the only way these things happen. Communities will rebuild. It sounds like you're going to be one of those that plants a flag there. So good luck, and we're all pulling for you.
We're trying to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So as you heard, some help is needed in Hawaii. Here are just some of the organizations that could use your support that we have vetted that we believe these are good organizations. There's the Maui Food Bank, there's the Red Cross, and there's the Hawaii Community Foundation. All of those folks we know and we have vetted that are working on the ground. Up next, Ferris wheels, fried food, and first-in-the-nation caucus goers. We have the latest from voters and candidates at the Iowa State Fair, where Trump is set to speak tomorrow on that old soapbox. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, there are now two distinct Republican primary contests happening right now. One is playing out in the court, and one is happening on the campaign trail. As Trump's lawyers argued with prosecutors over what he's allowed to say publicly regarding his latest indictment, some of his rivals were at the Iowa State Fair meeting caucus goers amidst the butter and fried food, making their pitch on why they should be the party's nominee. Trump will make his own State Fair pilgrimage tomorrow, but of course his candidacy and his legal troubles are still on the minds of people NBC News have been speaking with at the fairgrounds today. Here's some of what fairgoers from Iowa had to say.
He's been indicted 3 times now, potentially a 4th indictment coming. Mm-hmm. Does that impact your vote at all?
No, doesn't make a bit of difference because I think they're all bogus charges.
Does it concern you, though, that he's going to be tied up in all of the...
Yes, that's why I'm kind of leaning towards other candidates.
We need to find somebody who doesn't have a whole train load of baggage.
Well, I voted for him when he lost to Biden, so I guess it kind of depends on more I hear about the other ones running with him.
And joining me now on the ground from the most butterful place on earth, I did that for my producers, NBC's Dasha Burns. So Dasha, look, I'm always nervous on when we talk to voters. Is that the consensus? We have 3 highlights, all seem to be Trump voters in a general, but shopping for someone else in the primary. Is that representative of what you've been seeing?
Look, Chuck, the vast majority of folks that I've talked to say that they are open-minded. They say that they're undecided, and that's why you've got all of these candidates here working so hard. They're looking at the butter cows, the real cows. They're flipping burgers. They're doing all that they can to connect with these voters because while his lead is so large nationally, what we've seen in the polls is that his lead here in Iowa is narrower. It's still a big lead, but it's narrower and it's softer. And we saw what that softness means as we talked to voters today. It means that they are in support of the president, the former president, that they like him, they like his policies. But what you heard there, the baggage, they are concerned that he might not be able to win in a general election. And so they are listening to what these other folks have to say. We went to Governor Reynolds' Fairside Chats today. She hosted Mike Pence. She hosted Doug Burgum, Miami Mayor Suarez. And there were voters there. They were listening. They wanted to hear what the candidates had to say. The problem, though, is they can't really escape the Trump factor. Doug Burgum tried today when he was asked about Trump's legal problems. Take a listen to what he had to say.
If somebody wants to ask questions about, another candidate's legal problems, there's an entire industry built around that. Divisiveness is actually a super profitable industry for all the cable networks because that's what keeps people tuning in is as long as we have conflict. Leadership is not about conflict. Leadership is about problem solving. We're running to be the leader of this country.
So that's going to be the challenge for these candidates. Voters are open, but Trump is taking up all the oxygen as he frequently does. So how are they going to manage that in this primary? And of course, tomorrow, Trump's coming here. So is Governor DeSantis. They're going to be clashing the 2 frontrunners in this race. That might cause some fireworks here at what so far has been a pretty wholesome, very fun fair. But when those 2 get together, some arrows tend to fly, Chuck.
Well, it will be a packed fair. I remember Donald Trump and Sarah Palin were the back-to-back fairgoers back in 2015, and that was a monstrous mass of people. I imagine DeSantis and Trump will be similar. Dasha Burns at the best state fair on earth. Dasha, thanks. All right, let's get into the political fallout from all these legal wranglings today. Joining me now on set, NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur, Symone Sanders-Townsend, former senior advisor to Vice President Harris and host of MSNBC Symone, and Brendan Buckey, former advisor to Republican speakers Boehner, Ryan, and he's also an NBC News political analyst. Welcome all. Sahil, you're a creature of the Hill as a reporter, the best beat when it comes to politics. There's one angle to this we haven't covered yet in the special counsel decision on Hunter Biden. What does it do to the House Republicans' push to start an impeachment inquiry? Does this put it on pause?
I don't think it puts it on pause. I think what Republicans are trying to do here is create a heads I win, tails you lose situation by criticizing this appointment. The real goal is to
But they got the appointment.
They did get the appointment. They asked for the appointment, but they're not satisfied with the appointment.
Right.
They're attacking the U.S. attorney for what they call a sweetheart deal. The real goal is to damage President Biden and to make him a one-term president, to put Donald Trump back in the White House. Anything short of that, they will stick with the criticism that they don't trust David Weiss, that he can't be trusted because of the deal he cut with them. But does it affect impeachment? I don't think so. Speaker McCarthy has opened that door. We know from recent history, once you open that door, it's very difficult to close.
I hear you, but Brendan, with that sitting out there, that's the easy get-out-of-jail-free card for McCarthy not to hold this vote right now.
I don't know that it derails it entirely, but I think it might delay it, give McCarthy a little time to say, hold on a second.
Because we know the Don Bacons of the world don't want to vote for this.
Yeah,
right?
Kevin McCarthy understands that this is not good politics to do an impeachment right now, and he knows that they don't quite have the goods yet to go that far.
Symone, we have talked about this Hunter situation. We know that the president, he views it as family. He doesn't really hear, he doesn't want to hear about the political problems that come with it. But now it's a special counsel. And they can't compartmentalize this as a right-wing conspiracy anymore because it's his own attorney general that named the special counsel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to hear much more. I know after the special counsel was named, folks were like, wonder if Biden's going to go to the camera. This is the day he goes to the cameras. This is definitely not the day he goes to the camera. Yes, not the day he goes to the cameras to talk about this. And I think the appointment of a special counsel just ups the likelihood that we will never hear anything from the president or the White House press briefing room about this particular investigation. Set that aside, though. I think that, when the special counsel was named, Chuck, I was like, why do we need another special counsel? And I looked, and David Weiss, again, the letters that he sent to his letters from Jim Jordan, letters to Jim Jordan, the letter in response to Senator Lindsey Graham, it was clear from the last letter to me that David Weiss felt there was some additional there, and he did not have the leeway to go about and find out what it was, but had assurances that if he asked, he would get it. And Tuesday, apparently he asked.
So here we are. And, I want to put up, I think I have these Gallup numbers from earlier. Sahil, the fact that the unfavorable ratings for Trump and Biden are essentially even, Biden's are actually a couple points higher in that Gallup number, but this has been across the board, right? They're both viewed very negatively. This only muddies the picture even more. Really, does it not run the risk now for Biden that maybe the Dean Phillips conversation expands beyond people named Dean Phillips, and all of a sudden the backup plan of no labels, you can throw out the Joe Manchin, but that chatter now will get louder. It doesn't go away.
The chatter will. I don't think the no labels third-party candidacy still
I buy that on the no labels, but the primary challenge, I think, is more real now.
Plausibly. I think it's at least a major headache for President Biden because, every minute spent on Hunter Biden is a minute not spent on Donald Trump, not spent on the messages that they want to advance about his chaos and trying to drive that contrast. There's also a problem, a potential challenge, an unknown about the special counsel. Sometimes when they're appointed, they find things that they didn't set out to find. You never know where this is going to go. The authority here is very, very broad. Now, the optimistic take I've heard is that this is simply a procedural move for David Weiss to go to trial with Hunter Biden because there are jurisdictional issues.
Right, he couldn't file charges, right.
In California.
Right, or in Washington, right.
Exactly, that's where the tax charges came from, and he can't go to trial. You can waive them in a plea deal, but you can't go to trial unless you have broader authority. So that's the optimistic view from Biden world, is that that's the only reason this happened. Yeah. Nobody really knows. I mean, I think Symone is right that the White House is so determined to stay out of this. I spoke to a White House official a while ago, said they had no advance notice of this. They said, take your questions to Hunter's attorneys and to the DOJ.
Brendan, you're on the side of the Republicans that would like to see anybody other than Donald Trump nominated. Doesn't today make that actually harder?
Yeah, and look, I feel like Joe Biden has made himself very weak right now, and the big argument was we need to run somebody who can beat Joe Biden. Joe Biden looks like just about anybody could beat him at this moment, and maybe that's not fair. But if your argument if you're Ron DeSantis is we need somebody electable, there's plenty of polling that shows that Donald Trump is.
By the way, this was the same problem in 15 and 16. They wanted to say, Trump can't beat Clinton, but all the poll numbers indicated anybody could.
And anybody can look at this and see this is clearly a blind spot for Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. He loves his son, I'm sure. But if you are allowing your fortunes to be tied to whatever Hunter Biden may or may not have done, and we don't exactly know what it is the special counsel is now trying to look into, I mean, it would be, I think, wise for Democrats. I'm sure the president, of course, could never do this, but throw Hunter Biden under the bus.
Well, and Symone, I will say this. Look, I get all of the personal stuff. This is not a 24-year-old son of the President of the United States.
No.
This is a 52-year-old grown man who has made these mistakes throughout his life. We all feel sorry. Addiction is a terrible disease, all these things. He still made a lot of bad decisions that are against the law. And he is, everybody else would be responsible for their own actions.
Well, I think that Hunter Biden is having to take responsibility for his actions. I mean, he had a plea deal, now that plea deal fell apart in court that we all watched happen, and now there's a special counsel investigating him. And, I tend to lean on the side of those folks you talked to at the White House. It's that I think this is procedural, so David Weiss can go chase the leads that he could not chase without the special authority, and not that there's some additional there. But special counsels have broad authority. But I think this idea that Hunter Biden is not meeting any consequences, I don't know how that's true. I mean, he is literally under investigation. This man is literally now potentially going to trial. His plea deal literally fell apart in front of the entirety of the American public.
And I think it's important to point out, despite Republican efforts, we have not found anything that has tied it directly to Joe Biden.
Correct.
But I do think it is a very fair question to ask Joe Biden. Did you know that your adult son for many years was getting rich off of using your name and your connections? Were you completely oblivious to that this entire time? Did you say anything to him about that? I mean, those are very real questions that I think he will have to be asked at some point. And thus far, he has not really been willing to answer those.
I will just know. I remember, I worked the president's his third campaign, and there were questions about what did you know about Hunter Biden's business dealings, and Joe Biden said then what I think we'll hear him say now. He said he knew nothing. He was not aware. He had no part in any of the businesses. I think the follow-up question, though, that Brendan noted, what conversations did you have, is a rabbit hole that, on that campaign, we did not allow people to go down.
Look, the reason why, I've had people on the right go, how come you guys give Joe Biden the benefit of doubt? I said, because I covered him for 30 years, and unlike almost every United States senator, his net worth didn't grow 10x while sitting in the Senate, right, Sahil? He was known as a guy that did, but he didn't also write a letter like George H.W. Bush did to his sons and daughters and said, hey, people are going to try to use you to get to me or use their friendship with you to get to me. He does seem to have a blind spot on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, Biden doesn't have the kind of brand that the Clintons did for corruption and sleaze. So Hillary Clinton with Benghazi and all that stuff that all served in 2016, it was very bad for her because that did stick. It kind of confirmed what people already thought. Now, this could certainly damage President Biden. That's what Republicans are going to try to do. And depending on how his campaign and the White House handle it, who knows what's going to happen. But so far, he doesn't start off with that disadvantage, which I think is notable. He's not perceived as someone who's corrupt, and there hasn't been, as Brandon points out, a direct link to him.
Let me close with this. Merrick Garland. See, how's he running the Justice Department there, Symone?
Look, I know people are like, don't beat up on Merrick Garland. He has a plan. I would just note, I don't know what the plan is, but I would just note that Jack Smith wouldn't be up against the wall if the Justice Department coming in 2021 would have taken a hard look at the entirety of the January 6th case, not just the foot soldiers. And had it not been for the January 6th Select Committee, I don't think we would be seeing any of the folks at the top, including Donald Trump, currently being held accountable.
A lot of butterflies had to flap their wings to get to the point we got to. And that's sort of a point you want to make. I think it's a fair point on the blind spot of January 6th with Merrick Garland until we've gotten here. Symone, Brendan, Sahil. Friday news dumps. My gosh, right?
I don't want to go back.
Speaking of them, I got one more news dump for you. It has to do with our Sam Bankman-Fried. The disgraced former crypto king has just been ordered behind bars. Basically, the judge is tired of him having access to a computer. We'll have that breaking news. You're watching Meet the President. Welcome back. In an unusual move, the United States is now turning to Kenya to lead a multinational security mission amid rising gang violence and worsening humanitarian issues in the island country of Haiti, partially stemming from the assassination of the country's president more than 2 years ago. Officials in Kenya have offered to send a 1,000-strong police force to lead an international force in support of the Haitian police. And the international community has been quick to support this proposal after the U.S. and Canada both demurred on leading their own such security mission, even though Canada and the U.S. are part of the same hemisphere as Haiti. Kenya is not. For its part, the U.S. Department of State continues to insist its commitment to Haiti is, quote, unwavering. So I'm bringing in Keith Mines. He's the director of the Latin America program at the U.S. Institute of Peace to try to get a little more clarity here of what's going on. So anytime there had been problems with Haiti in the past, the United States, well, you can go back decades, has always felt a kinship, responsibility, however you want to look at it, at Haiti. This was a strange decision to outsource to Kenya. What's behind this?
Well, there's not a lot of enthusiasm by anyone, frankly, to go and do an international security mission in Haiti right now. That kind of mission in general is not popular on either side of the political spectrum here in the United States. And frankly, there's a lot of Haiti fatigue. There's just a sense that we've done this a lot in the past and it hasn't gone well, so why would we jump in again? A lot of that, I think, is misguided. There have been times when things have gotten considerably better.
And it's usually been with our intervention.
It's usually been with our intervention. We're the ones that are closest. There's 1 million Haitians that live in the United States.
Don't the Dominicans want us involved?
The Dominicans would like to see a solution of any kind. They're not really in a position to do it, so they'd like to see something that would fix the situation. I think they would naturally defer to us, but we've deflected, so I think they're open to other solutions.
Why has this gang issue been so much harder to deal with? Look, there's always been sort of factions within Haiti, and it's been, but this seems to be on another level.
Well, if you go back to 2017, I think that was really the beginning of what we're experiencing now, and that was when the UN mission pulled way back from what it was doing before. Haiti is the kind of place that needs a long-term accompaniment, and I wouldn't say intervention or overwhelming force, but it needs an accompaniment with its police to keep things on track. It's just the reality that a relatively new police force has, and it's been a relatively new police force for quite a while.
Where do the gangs get their financing?
So they are financing now almost exclusively by kidnapping, and that's the real chilling effect that it's having on the society. They've taken over the streets of Port-au-Prince, about 80% of the city, and they just finance it through kidnapping, a little bit of extortion, but mostly through snagging people off the streets.
And what their economy, they used to do decent tourism economy, I assume. Now that's just shut down. People are just not coming.
Well, they've never really recovered from the earthquake. I mean, the earthquake in 2010, frankly, it was on the rise as a country, I think, up to the earthquake. But I think from there, it's really never quite recovered. But the UN pulled back in 2017, and it's made it really hard since then. And that's what gave the opening for the gangs. With the gangs, you had the drop in security and then the assassination of the president.
I'm just surprised at the lack of political will on this side. And I say this as a South Floridian, that there, I guess, where's the Haitian American diaspora, marching on Marco Rubio's office and Joe Biden's footsteps?
Well, one of the things that I point to, I think there's a lot of people that would like to see things get better. They're not quite sure what to do, frankly. And I think there's a sense of
fair point given.
Right. What do we do? I would offer two things that could be done. One is that there is a need for a multinational political solution to this. And that's one of the things that the international community has also deferred on. CARICOM has a small effort that they've started. There was the Montana group. There's been December 21. There's been a number of initiatives.
Is there a model in the country where we've done something like this before where it's worked, though?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a number.
What would you point to?
Well, I would point, first off, to the Balkans was one where we just put the diplomatic juice behind an effort and didn't stop until we had it. And I think it's the kind of thing that can be done. It's a bad example now because of how it turned out, but the first few years of Afghanistan, we did the same thing. We collected together all the different factions of Afghanistan and the Loya Jirga, gave them a good way forward. And there's smaller examples that I've been involved in.
But all of this looks like nation building to people, which of course we know politically, that's how this stuff becomes.
Correct, and we probably needed to rebrand it. But look, at the end of the day, if we want to have a nation that functions rather than us trying to do everything or waiting for refugees to wash ashore, this is the way to do it.
I got to ask about Kenya's. How often have they wanted to sort of flex their international diplomacy muscle like this?
Well, I think Kenya would benefit from this if they can pull it off well.
Yeah.
So there's something in the international sphere that would be good for them. But I think they're also, I mean, it's just the beginning. We have to also be honest that they have agreed to lead a mission if there's a mandate, if they can find the other forces.
And if other countries will come.
Correct. So there's a lot still to be done, and that's the part of it I think we have to watch how that lines up.
Well, There's always a lot of things going on, but I'm glad that we got a few minutes on this story. Keith Mines,
Great.
Thanks for your expertise.
Good to be here.
We're following some breaking news out of New York, where crypto exchange co-founder Sam Bankman-Fried is now heading to jail immediately. A judge revoked his bail and ordered him into custody, saying the FTX co-founder had engaged in witness tampering. Well, joining me now is CNBC's technology reporter Mackenzie Sagalos. So, Mackenzie, basically, they want him to stop having access to a computer, right?
I mean, that's part of it. So one of the big points of contention was where he would actually be remanded into custody. The government had already had conversations with Putnam, which is a jail facility that would still give him access to a laptop with an internet connection, because the big question here is whether he would be able to adequately prepare for trial, access discovery documents, and the government wanted to ensure that that was possible while also putting into place a lot of safeguards that were necessary to avoid the kind of witness tampering that they alleged has been happening the last few months.
And that, I mean, I saw a specific was, they think he leaked documents to a reporter?
And that's not even a question. So, yes, lawyers for the defense acknowledged that that had indeed happened, but they were arguing that this was, a First Amendment right. The judge came out to say that if even part of that motivation had to do with hurting a witness or trying to affect the outcome, then it was considered a felony. It was certainly grounds the judge deemed to revoke bail.
Well, as you know, in my political beat, the issue of witness tampering and discovery being leaked is part of another situation with the former president. So it's interesting that this is the way this judge reacted here. Is there any chance he could get back into the judge's good graces and get back into his Stanford campus home confinement?
So, it was actually I was in the courtroom today and then just hopped over to 30 Rock. But this ruling was a 33-minute explanation from the judge. The entire hearing took about 90 minutes. The judge repeatedly said positive things about Cohen, who is the attorney representing Sam Bankman-Fried, and the effort that he was making. But it just seemed that he was quite sure of the position that he had. The defense team requested that they stay the ruling until they could have an appeal considered in the court. That was denied by the judge. And again, it was a very respectful exchange. He just acknowledged the fact that he didn't feel the defense had an adequate argument to make here.
And this was a request from the prosecution?
So it was a request from the prosecution to it was a request from the prosecution to jail him, yes. And then the defense was saying we're open to just a more stringent set of terms around his home arrest.
When do we expect this trial to begin?
Well, at this point, October 2nd, and the judge explicitly asked the defense today whether or not they wanted to, seek an adjournment or extend out that trial date. They said that at this point they're not looking to do that, so everything is still on track.
Well, one would assume now that he's in jail, he may want his trial to start sooner rather than later. Anyway, Mackenzie Sagalos for CNBC. I know it's a busy day. Again, the old Friday news dumps all over the country, keeping those of us not on vacation working. Anyway. Mackenzie, thank you. That does it for this hour and this week. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll have interviews with former Vice President and now 2024 presidential candidate Mike Pence and a congressman who keeps talking up primarying President Biden. And after today's news, does it get more serious? Dean Phillips of Minnesota. NBC News Now coverage continues from there in Gilchrist, who's sitting in for Hallie Jackson.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.